It's your favorite time of week again. Wednesday. Prepare, select cock and ball torture devices of your choosing, and buckle your fuckles, because we're finishing this goddamn iceberg if it kills me. So, the first week we did the first half. Who would have ever thought? Now we're doing the second half. Now, if you haven't seen the first half, I do recommend it. It's really fucking long, so if you watch it in like 1 or 2 sessions, it's probably the best for viewing pleasure. But, you know, an iceberg video isn't any fun if you don't know the top layers. Or just keep watching this one. I really don't care, as long as I'm getting views and you consider pressing that sexy red button down at the bottom there. You know, I've been seeing record numbers of growth. It'd be a real shame if I didn't blow up, right? Anyway, let's just dive right into this. Level 5? 1? Level? Yes. Basically, at this point, if you know about this stuff, you're like this guy on the right. Neckbeard. You're probably spending a little bit too much time on the web. Maybe after you're done with this video, you should go touch some grass. But let's just dive into this, because this is where all the cool stuff is, and by cool I mean tragically heartbreaking and so horrific I can't make any jokes, so I really need to have you get all of your laugh-ins now. Fort Worth Missing Trio. The Fort Worth Missing Trio was a group of 3 young women who went missing on December 23rd, 1974. The victims are one Rachel Trilisha. She was 17 years old at the time of her disappearance. There was Renee Wilson, she was 14 years old, and Julie Ann Mosley, who was 9 years old at the time of her disappearance. They all went to the mall for the day, and they simply never came home. Where they went, completely unknown. What happened to them? Completely unknown. There have been no new leads in the case. Private detectives that were hired simply found no signs of them, and a slow investigation response because of a belief that they were runaways completely hindered it. To this day, the bodies haven't been recovered, the women have never been seen, and nothing has ever been told to the families. Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès. I hope I didn't butcher that pronunciation. It's been way too long since I've done anything related to French, because French is the language of surrender. Now, no more funny, let's get fucking depressed. The Dupont family was a family of 5 who went missing suddenly in April of 2011. Now, there is an incredibly detailed timeline of the family's final actions, including Xavier purchasing rifle bullets and getting licensed to use a gun that he inherited from his father mere weeks before the murders and/or disappearance, bank accounts being closed out, cement being bought, shovels being bought, jobs being quit without people being seen, and even the kids disappearing from school suddenly. And that is until the discovery of the bodies. An investigation was opened and revealed about Xavier's purchase of the DIY materials after he goes missing, and the rest of the family is just simply nowhere to be seen. A wanted notice is issued for the whole family, and then during the day of Thursday 21st, investigators uncover the remains of the wife, Agnes, and the 4 children under the patio in the back garden of the house. The family's 2 Labrador dogs had also been killed and buried, and Xavier was gone. He was never found, but his car was, after he had gotten away in another one. Investigators turned to monasteries because it's speculated that Xavier Dupont could have simply withdrawn to a religious monastery where he'd be afforded privacy. There was a fast and wildly inaccurate autopsy stating that the victims were drugged and shot dead with a .22 long rifle as they slept. Xavier owned a weapon of this caliber. The problem is that a .22 long rifle is not a good caliber to kill people with, and you can actually survive being shot in the head with that. Not saying that the DuPont family did, but it is possible. This paired with the fact that no one thought that they would survive gunshots, that's a bit of an obscure fact, but just simply how inaccurate the morgue work was in delivering the cause of death and the death dates has raised question. There was a lot of media coverage and even a hunt for Xavier. However, he was simply never found, and a slap and dash funeral was put together for the whole family on April 28th. There have been lines of inquiry, but there's never been anything. Xavier said that he was going to Australia to some people, but claimed that he was going to America as part of his witness protection to others. He never had a straight story, and that makes things very confusing. There were bones discovered in a forest where Xavier was last seen. There was also a Glasgow airport arrest, however it turned to not be Xavier. And then there's just the theory that the family simply went to America or Australia for witness protection. Maybe Xavier did actually kill them, or maybe something else was happening, but the family of Xavier seems to believe that he wouldn't have done it. Obviously, no one wants to think their son's a murderer. Whatever happened, I hope the Dupont de Ligonnès family is doing well. Mayumi Arashi. Mayumi Arashi is a run-of-the-mill missing persons case. Mayumi tells her sister that she's going out to meet with her schoolmate, simply known as B, who leaves a house and then never comes home. B claims to have never made any plans to meet Mayumi, and there's never any signs of her. What makes this case chilling is that during an interview Super J Channel performs with the family, there's a piece of paper behind Mayumi's father that says, "Don't believe what Yoko says." Yoko was Mayumi's sister, who was also the last person to ever talk to her alive. Alice Corbett. Alice Corbett was a young woman from Utica, New York, who was studying at Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts at the time of her disappearance. She disappeared in 1925, and her roommate was found dead by asphyxiation via illuminating gas. Corbett had written a note stating just simply, "Mother, I am going home," and the content was also indicative that Corbett was in a confused state of mind. She was last seen wearing a dark dress, a hat, and a distinctive yellow rain slicker, and then she was never seen again. College staff and students searched the campus. Massachusetts State Police and local Boy Scouts conducted ground searches in the area because Corbett reportedly enjoyed hiking, and her father even posted a $500 reward for information leading to her discovery. Local radio stations broadcast her description, but she was never found. No one ever saw her past a certain point, and she just simply never came back. The aftermath of the case was kind of just left to lay until 1928 when Frances Smith, another student, vanished from her residence on campus in January 13th of 1928 and was found dead in 1929, but no official cause of death was reported in that case. And in 1933, a New York man confessed to killing Corbett while living in Hadley in 1925, but police dismissed his confession as completely false. After that, there was never another lead again. Marvin Clark. Marvin Allen Clark disappeared October 30th, 1926, and his case has the distinction of being known as the oldest active missing persons case in America. According to census records, Clark was born in 1852 in Marion County, Iowa. Both of Clark's parents were from New York, and Clark moved to Oregon with his wife in 1910, where he resided in the community of Holbrook. Clark was a one-time marshal of the town of Linton, a district that would later become part of Portland. Now, on October 30th, 1926, Clark left his home in Tigard around 1 p.m. to visit his daughter, who was a resident and manager of the Hereford Hotel in northwest Portland. The initial report of Clark's disappearance came on November 6, 1926, and the Morning Oregonian stated that he had embarked to Portland by stagecoach, though a report published the following week stated he traveled by bus. Clark was last seen on Yamhill Street in downtown Portland dressed in a dark suit and slacks, and that was it. Clark was a very distinctive man who had a paralyzed right arm and a very distinctive limp, and people hoped that this would help lead to his discovery, and his daughter even offered a $100 reward, but he was never found. He went missing after, obviously, and no more leads were in the case. Clark's wife, Mary, received a disconnected postcard purportedly written by her husband that was postmarked in Bellingham, that there had been 2 witnesses who saw Clark in 2 hotels, and this is on November 9th. But the letter indicated that someone not quite as educated or maybe highly aged like Clark was wrote it, because Clark was an educated man who would spell things correctly. Now after this, he's just gone. Man's just simply vanishes. In 1986, though, nearly, 80 years after his disappearance, loggers discovered a nearly complete human skeleton in the woods between Tigard and Portland. No identification was found with the body, but an 1888 Liberty head nickel, a 1919 penny, pocket watch, leather shoes, Fraternal Order of Eagles pocket knife, and 4 tokens with the descriptions D and P were found near the body. There was also a .38 revolver and a spent shell found near the remains, and a pair of wire-rimmed glasses as well. The autopsy of John Doe, the unnamed skeleton, was ruled death by suicide because of the bullet hole in the man's skull and, the .38 revolver. Several days after the discovery, Clark's granddaughter came forward suspecting John Doe may have been her missing grandfather, but a positive identification could not be made at the time, and Willoughby, the granddaughter, died in 1991. In 2011, however, medical state examiners revisited Clark's missing persons file, got sufficient DNA evidence from the skeleton and then maternal link, and in 2018 it was proven that the skeleton was in fact not at all genetically related to Clark. So Marvin Clark remains missing, and wherever his skeleton is, hopefully it's found soon. Michael Rockefeller. Yes, even the rich do bleed, which is why we should fucking go French Revolution style and guillotine them all, but that's for another video. Michael Rockefeller is a member of the Rockefeller family, presumed to have died on November 19th, 1961. He was on an excursion in the, what island was it? In southern Netherlands, New Guinea. He was studying the Asmat tribe at the time of his disappearance, and he and Dutch anthropologist Rien Wassing were on a 40-foot dugout canoe about 3 miles from shore when their pontoon was swamped and overturned. 2 local guides swam for help, but it was slow in coming, and after drifting for some time, Rockefeller said to Wassing, "I think I can make it," and swam for shore. He didn't make it to shore. It was 12 miles away from the shore when he attempted to swim to safety, and this supports the theory that he died from exhaustion, exposure, and/or drowning. Wassing was rescued the next day, while Rockefeller was never seen again, despite an intensive and lengthy search effort. At the time, Rockefeller's disappearance was a major world news item, and his body was never found. He was declared legally dead in 1964. Now, what is most likely is that he fucking drowned. I've swam 3 miles before, and that shit really drains you. Like, I could not have done a 4th mile. So unless this man is just a goddamn athletic Chad, a legend, a god, there is most likely no way he swam 12 miles to shore. And he most likely drowned, but some people think that because of the fact cannibalism nor headhunting was not discriminated against in Asmat culture, and were part of a cycle of tit-for-tat revenge, Rockefeller might have been killed by them as revenge for white people killing their tribesmen. Or maybe he was eaten. Some people even speculate he's living in the jungle, but I don't think that's very possible at all. I think, the weirdest it could have gotten is his body washing up on shore. Rockefeller's definitely dead. John Lake. John Lake was a New York journalist who, in December 10th of 1967, was walking to the subway to go home and then disappeared. His wife filed a case 4 days later, and his disappearance was even investigated by the Pinkerton Detective Agency, which was hired by Newsweek. But there was simply nothing to be found. Years after, a police officer for missing persons showed his son a February 1968 photo of a corpse who closely resembled Lake, but couldn't be positively identified. Now, what makes this notable is that Lake was highly admired by other journalists and athletes, all of whom simply came out to commend Lake for his professionalism, his preparedness, and the loss that the journalism community had suffered with his death. Barbara Newhall Follett. Barbara Newhall Follett was a critically acclaimed author and child prodigy who disappeared on December 7, 1939, following an argument with her husband. Her husband, Rogers, did not file Follett's disappearance with the police for 2 weeks, claiming he was waiting for her to return. 4 months after notifying police, he requested a bulletin be issued. But the bulletin was issued under Follett's married name of Rogers, and it went unnoticed by the media, who didn't notice it until 1966. In 1952, 13 years after Follett disappeared, her mother Helen began insisting that Brookline police investigate the matter more thoroughly because it was awfully suspicious of Rogers to make no effort to find his wife. However, nothing was ever found, no body was ever recovered, and no evidence of foul play was ever procured. The date and circumstances of her death were never established, and she remains to this day missing. Kayla Berg. Kayla Berg was a teenager who disappeared from Wisconsin in 2009, and she lived in the city of Antigo, but went to Wasau to visit an old boyfriend of hers 2 weeks after her 16th birthday. The building she was dropped off in was actually vacant, however, and deemed condemned unlivable to most people, so the only people who would have reasonably been there are squatters and hobos. There was never any leads in the case, despite it receiving widespread media coverage, and she remains to this day completely gone. There was some speculation of her being a runaway, but normally runaways contact loved ones, and she never did. T.J. Davidson and Cindy Smith. T.J. Davidson was a very young little boy who was abducted from his aunt's car in 1985. There was never any leads on the case, he was never found, and a few years later, his aunt, Cindy Smith, also went missing. And while there's no connection to the two cases, it is very interesting the coincidence that happened there. Andrew Gosden. Andrew Gosden was a 14-year-old from Doncaster in Britain, and on the day that he went missing, he ditched school, pulled out 200 euros from his bank account, prepared a backpack and his PSP, and then bought a bus ticket to London. He refused to take it on the way back, despite it only costing a little bit more. Or should I say, a return ticket, despite it only costing a little bit more. And he was never found. His family reported him missing later that night after realizing that he wasn't home and later finding out that he never even went to school. And despite possible sightings, the case went cold. And good job us. We did it. We went from level 5 and finished it, so now we go to level 6. This stuff here is going to be even more obscure. I presume more missing persons cases from over 100 years ago, maybe 80 years ago, and also just the really, really weird and wacky ones. Still haven't gotten an alien abduction case though, so I'm kind of bummed out about that. And if you've made it this far in the video, thank you. Seriously, it means a lot. Appreciate it, man. Consider liking and subscribing. Now that's enough being a shell whore, let's just dive right into it. Buckle your fuckles. Disappearances of Paul and Sarah Skiba and Lorenzo Shivers. Paul Skiba and Sarah Skiba were a daughter and father who were working a job together with Lorenzo Deshawn Shivers, an employee of Paul Skiba's moving business. Now Sarah was just a little girl who was simply accompanying her father, who owned the Tough Movers Company in Westminster. He was on a job along with his employee Shivers, and the last sighting of the three was in Morrison that evening. Sarah was reported missing by her mother after Paul failed to return her home. Paul's girlfriend reported Paul missing after he failed to return home, and Lorenzo was kind of thrown to the wind and not really reported missing. Police originally didn't take the case seriously until they found Paul and Sarah's blood in large quantities in the back of the Tough Movers Company truck, when they finally, after a month, began to suspect foul play, but to this day, there's been no leads besides a car owned by Shivers being found in a parking lot. Charles Rogers. Charles Rogers was a missing person who disappeared in June of 23rd of 1965 at the age of 43 in Houston, Texas. He was declared legally dead in July 1975, but was never found. What makes this case notable is that when police went to investigate his home, they found his aunt and nephew dead, dismembered, and decapitated. The murder case was very clearly solely on Charles, however, Mr. Rogers had just disappeared. There was even allegations of involvement in the assassination of JFK, however, that's about as wacky as most allegations in the assassination of JFK get. So in 1975, a Houston judge declared Rogers legally dead so his estate could be probated, and the case still officially remains unsolved with Rogers as the only suspect. Jaleik Rainwalker. Thank you, mildly sloppily written Penn State University article. This is very useful because I couldn't find anything else on it. Jaleik Rainwalker was a 12-year-old young man when he went missing from his adoptive parents' home in Greenwich, New York. Now, Jaleik was obviously born into a different and difficult life, born into a crack and cocaine addiction because his mom used while she was pregnant, leaving 6 different foster homes before finally being adopted by Stephen Kerr and Jocelyn McDonald in 2002. Jaleik, understandably, because of the abuse he suffered in his childhood, was not an easy child to take care of. He would have violent outbursts and temper tantrums and didn't know how to regulate himself, and even his siblings said that they were sometimes afraid of him. Now, the family that Jaleik was staying with was not traditional. They lived together in rural New York with no running water, limited electricity, and the family all sleeping together in one room, which probably had a very bad impact on Jaleik's mental health. Leading up to his disappearance, Jaleik was getting more and more violent, and upon the time of his disappearance, the police requested him and Stephen Kerr, that is, and his wife take a polygraph. Jocelyn agreed and passed, but Stephen refused. After Jaleik's disappearance, Stephen has become the primary person of interest. However, there's never been enough dirt on him to arrest his ass, even though Jaleik's adoptive grandmother believes that Stephen did something. Jaleik hasn't been found, understandably, but hopefully he's okay. Wicana was an Indonesian minister and independence leader. He forced Sukarno and Hatta to declare independence from Japan immediately after the surrender of the Japanese to America, and he was the first Indonesian Minister of Youth and Sport, although in this era the office was called Minister of State Youth Affairs. He was a member of the Indonesian Communist Party, and after a coup d'etat attempt, he was arrested and went missing. Specifically after the PKI movement, he was arrested after other PKI delegates went to China. Wicana ordered the other delegates, however, to stay in Beijing, and when he turned to Indonesia, he was arrested, and then he was let go, supposedly, and then arrested by 10 unidentified armed men in his house, after which he went missing. Now, after a failed coup d'etat attempt, I wonder why he would have gone missing. That's really such a pressing mystery. What could have ever happened to Wicana? Tanja Groen. Tanja Groen, from what I could dig up, was a Dutch 18-year-old woman who went missing after attending a party with some friends. She cycled home alone and was never heard from again. There have been several investigations over the years, including searching rivers and even digging up another man's grave off of a tip. However, she remains gone to this day, and there is simply no trace of her. Patricia Spencer and Pamela Pobley. The disappearance of these two young women happened on October of 1969. 69. They went missing after presumably committing truancy together, and they had both been seen walking in each other's company shortly before they vanished forever. The pair was aged 16 and 15, and respectively were not considered friends at the time they disappeared. The bodies were never recovered, yet it's believed by authorities that both of their lives ended in homicide. The case only started when Pobley suddenly didn't show up at a party she had said she would have been at, and her fiancé called her mother, slightly worried. Her mother had no fucking clue where Pobley was, and was like, "Hey, the fuck is this?" And they called the police. The police never found it, and there's not been any meaningful leads in the case, and they remain missing to this day. Matthew Baca. Matthew Baca was 33 years old at the time of his disappearance, and with one Eddie Barragan and George Garibay in Ciudad Juarez on January 10, 1998. Several Mexican police officers yanked them out of the Kentucky Club on Juarez Avenue. They were all residents of El Paso, so Americans, and despite the fact that dozens of witnesses saw the police abductions in broad daylight, the cops maintained that they didn't do it. The club is only a couple of blocks away from Paso del Norte International Bridge, and all three men in the bar that night may have been participants in a smuggling group. Eddie Barragan was very wealthy, and money comes from somewhere. The leading theory is that the police in Juarez just killed them. Mexico has very different standards, and this is the 90s, so they can get away with more stuff than American police can. It's incredibly likely that Matthew was just fucking capped. Cheryl Grimmer. Cheryl Grimmer was a 3-year-old toddler who was kidnapped on the 12th of January, 1970, from Meadow Beach in Wollongong, Illawarra, New South Wales. God, some Australian names are just straight fucking gibberish. She'd been in the shower block at the beach when witnesses claim a man took her and ran off, and it was believed she was strangled to death around an hour after her abduction in the nearby suburb of... Man, you gonna write that like it's a fucking word? Get the fuck out my face, Australia. Now, back into the tragedy of the matter. There was nothing in the investigation until in the 2000s, when Michael Gallagher stated it's entirely possible Cheryl and her kidnapper were both dead, but expressed hope that someone may know the truth. There was also the idea that Cheryl may be alive and free, and encouraged anybody who believes they were her to come forward. One of Cheryl's characteristics cited as a possible identifier was a belly button which protruded out 1 centimeter due to medical condition. A woman did step up saying she may be Cheryl. However, there was nothing that came of that because it was proved to not be a match of Cheryl's DNA. Now, it was formally ruled that Cheryl had died shortly after going missing due to an undetermined cause. However, the body was never found, so it is entirely possible that she's still alive. On the 23rd of March 2017, a suspect was arrested in the case because he had been in the Melbourne suburb of Frankston at 1 p.m. the previous day, and he was charged with Cheryl's abduction and murder at the local police station, and was incarcerated in Silverwater Correctional Complex until his court case. It was unlikely that Cheryl's body will ever be found, as there was substantial development in the once rural area 47 years since the abduction, and South Wales Police and South Wales Court attempted to charge the man. However, because he was mentally ill, there was evidence that was inadmissible in court, and there was also no body. He was let go. Robin Graham. Robin Graham was an American college student who disappeared from a Los Angeles freeway in the early hours of November 15, 1970, after her car had broken down. She's not been heard from since, nor are there any clues to her whereabouts or subsequent fate. Wow. Graham's case is often included in television programs focusing on missing persons, but, again, no tips have ever come forward. California Highway Patrol officers noted that Graham was stranded beside her vehicle and stopped several times to talk with her, but they did not stop one final time when they observed her talking with a young man who was likely involved in her abduction. Their actions were consistent with existing policy, but based off of Graham's disappearance, California Highway Patrol policy was officially changed to ensure the safety of all stranded female motorists. The disappearance itself simply goes cold after that last spotting by the California Highway Patrol. She was out that night, her car broke down, a young man in a Corvette picked her up off the highway. Now, this happened to two other women, leading police officers to suspect foul play, and just like the other two women, no sign of her was ever found. Well, we've done it. We're about halfway through this iceberg. So, welcome to level, what number? 7. Level 7. Welcome. If you know this stuff, Dolphin? I don't understand why they use that image in these icebergs charts, but whatever. So this stuff is stuff that pretty much no one's gonna know about. I mean, we've been at that point for a while, but this shit just keeps getting wackier and wackier, so much so that not even Wikipedia knows about. By the way, these videos are powered by Wikipedia, so if you enjoy my content, you should go donate to Wikipedia. I know I don't have thousands of subscribers and a large platform, but every dime counts. Wikipedia are almost as money hungry as I am. Actually, that's mean to Wikipedia. Anyway, let's just dive right in. The Scholze family. The Scholze family was a German family who went missing in July of 2015. There was the father, Marco, and the mother, Sylvia, and the daughter, Miriam. They went to visit a horse farm close to their home, and this was the last time they were ever seen alive together. It was school holidays, so Miriam was out for the summer, and Marco was unemployed. Sylvia had a job at a grocery store, but she simply failed to show up after Wednesday, July 22nd. It took until August before a credible witness called the police and said that she saw the Scholze family the very same day that they disappeared. However, this was after Wednesday the 22nd, and police hounds could only find traces of Sylvia and Miriam, but they suddenly ended at the riverside. The only trace of Marco does not just lead to the riverside, but it also leads away from it. However, Marco himself is also missing. The current working theory is that Marco killed his family and then killed himself, which is why the family leads one way to the riverside but not back, whereas Marco goes there and back. Marco was known to suffer from alcoholism and financial struggles within the family, so it wouldn't be out of character for what we've heard from him. There are only German sources, so thank you very much to user FuckTim from 4 years ago for the source here, because without you, I would not have been able to read this shit. Gwendolyn Clemons. Gwendolyn Clemons was a 23-year-old mother of one who went missing 38 years ago on Thanksgiving. She was last seen that day, stated she was going to start a new life with some man in 1982, and then was never seen again. Clemons left Missouri that time in the company of said unidentified man to start a new life in Florida. The child's body was recovered less than 2 weeks after this under the I-10 bridge, and Gwendolyn has never been found since. A woman's body was found in a nearby river, but Clemons remains a missing person. There's been no leads, and the unidentified guy got off scot-fucking-clean. Hannah Up. Hannah Up suffered from a condition known as dissociative fugue, something that basically causes weeks-long bursts of amnesia. These bursts are incredibly rare, just 0.2% of the population is affected with the condition, and dissociative fugue episodes can last anywhere from days to months to years. She disappeared 2 times beforehand, twice in New York, her simply going missing and completely unaware of who she was before she went missing, and this led to her moving eventually to the Virgin Islands. Now, when she was in a dissociative fugue state, she was drawn towards water, and the last episode she had, her most mysterious disappearance, occurred in 2017. Now, she was a vibrant member of the local community, involved in dancing, swimming, and teaching at a local school, and enjoying an active social life, but before she went missing, things were off, and then her stuff was found left at home, her sandals were found at a bar near the beach, and she was never found again. Some people think that she drowned, maybe she swam to a nearby island. However, Up's case has stagnated over the years, and she likely won't be turning up anytime soon. Yutaka Kume. Yutaka Kume is a man who is believed to have been abducted by North Korean agents in Noto, Japan on September 19th, 1977. He is one of 17 Japanese citizens who are officially recognized by the Japanese government as abducted by North Korean agents, and Yutaka Kume himself was a security guard that worked at Tokyo's Mitaka City Hall. He was last seen on a beach in Noto, Ishikawa Prefecture, Japan, and after he was seen on this beach, he was never heard from again. And in 1977, North Korean agents were abducting citizens by boats. It's rumored to have been hundreds of them that were kidnapped. However, North Korean government officials have only confessed to 13 abductions. Not one of these is Yutaka. Obviously, the North Korean government, being the closest we get to literal fucking dystopia, isn't going to say anything and is going to deny all knowledge, and also going to protect the suspects in the kidnapping, which there are a few. Si-ho Kim, one of them specifically. Yutaka remains missing, but wherever he could have went, it's most likely a spy school, him being forced to teach North Korean children Japanese norms so that they can act as better agents. Again, though, this is some wacky and wild shit you'd see in a fucking cartoon, which describes North Korea. They're literally just cartoon villains, honestly. Jim Thompson. Jim Thompson was a business mogul who revitalized the fabrics industry, and clothing as we know it today would not be the same without him. However, in 1967, March 26th, he went missing while going for a walk in Malaysia's Cameron Highlands. He and a close friend were headed to the Highlands for a holiday at the Moonlight Bungalow, now the Jim Thompson Cottage. However, he went on a walk on his own, and he was never seen again. An intense search was conducted after the police declared he was lost, and even the army got involved on it. The search went on for 11 days with sporadic additional searching that went on for months, and the case obviously generated worldwide publicity because in 1967, Jim Thompson was a massive fucking deal. There were a shit ton of rumors like Thompson has been kidnapped, although no ransom note was ever found, had been murdered, although his body was never recovered, had voluntarily left to do secret work in resolving the Vietnam War, even though he's not fucking Iron Man, or was eliminated by business rivals, which is actually kind of likely. One researcher believes that the clue to Thompson's mystery may lie in some bone fragments that were found in 1985, but without the skull, it's not really worth much. The case has gone cold, and at this point I doubt that Jim Thompson is ever going to be found, so rest in peace, buddy. Patricia Blau, Renee Brule, and Ann Miller. The three of these women took a weekend trip on Saturday, July 2nd, 1966, to Lake Michigan at the Indiana Dunes State Park. There were thousands of people there at the time, and the three of them were last seen getting onto a boat with a man with short, dark hair and a decent tan, which happens to be 90% of the people who were at the lake that weekend. The same boat that this guy had was also the boat that everybody had. With around 6,000 boats on the lake that day, it was completely pointless for the Coast Guard to even try to look for that. And again, the description of the man fit literally every guy in the Midwest who's at a beach, so they never found anything of the three, and the three never turned up. What's hilarious, though, is it took 2 days before the Rangers realized the items belonging to the three women who had been reported missing had been turned in. So, on top of the fact that Joe Everyman appears to have been the one who kidnapped them, the fact that the Rangers were so fucking goofy that they forgot that the people who they were looking for had left their belongings on the beach didn't help things. Here it is. Here we are. The final level. If you have knowledge on this, you're clearly not even human. You're simply beyond human. You see this dolphin guy right here? Yeah, no, you've transcended him. That dolphin wishes he was you. If you've made it this far, I'd like to genuinely thank you for watching. A lot of work goes into these videos, and YouTube and creativity in general is my passion. So if you've made it this far and are still watching, like the video, comment about something if you want, and subscribe. It's free, it helps me achieve my dreams, and you can undo it at any time you want. And without further ado, buckle your fuckles and squeeze your sphincters, nerds, because we're getting on the magic school bus straight to hell. Let's dive right in. Jacqueline Chiong. Jacqueline Chiong is one of two Chiong sisters who disappeared in Cebu City, Philippines. They were supposedly murdered and raped by one Mr. Lorania. However, the case was complete and utter bullshit, and I will dive into that later. One of the supposed bodies of the Chiong sisters was found in a ravine. However, no formal autopsy was ever done, no proper identification was ever completed, and worst of all, it was later confirmed, basically, that it wasn't even the body of one of the Chiong sisters. The other Chiong sister was never found. Now, Filipino Supreme Courts pulled one Mr. Juan Paco Lorania and 6 other assailants out of their assholes and a magic hat, and then charged them with murder, which, after denying the testimony of 45 separate people stating that these perpetrators were not even in Cebu City at the time of the disappearance, charged all of them, found them guilty, and then sentenced them to death. There is nothing that riles my fucking guts, that boils my blood more than a bullshit court case, and I have never seen one so goddamn stinky in my fucking life. Fuck you, people of the Philippines, versus Francisco Juan Lorania. Is he guilty? I don't know. But did he deserve a fair trial? Yes. Yes, he did. Was this a fair trial? I highly doubt it. Karlie Guse. Karlie Guse was a 16-year-old young woman who disappeared from her Shaftland home in Mono County, California on October 13th, 2018. Now, she was picked up from the neighboring Bishop at around 8 p.m. the previous night, where the teen allegedly told her stepmom she had smoked marijuana earlier in the evening. The stepmother, Melissa, indicated that Karlie acted paranoid and disoriented, but once they arrived back home, she calmed Karlie down and even slept with her in her room to ensure she was okay. At around 5:30 the following morning, Melissa reportedly woke up, and when she looked over, Karlie was next to her lying awake. Melissa said she dozed off again for a short period, then woke up at 7:15 to find Karlie missing. There was no signs of forced entry into the home, there was nothing taken, Karlie was just simply gone. Now, Karlie's biological mother, Lindsay Fairley, says she has her doubts about their story, and Lindsay said that the pair changed their timeline and version of events several times. She thinks that her daughter died of a drug overdose, however, nothing has ever been found of it, her body has never been found, and the step-parent and parent have never been charged on charges related to Karlie, that is. Her father was recently arrested for, corporal injury to a spouse, but he was bailed out after posting a $50,000 bond. This isn't related to the case. John Kerrigan. John Patrick Kerrigan was one of 2 Franciscan priests found murdered, or at least not found at all. disappeared and presumed murdered between 1982 and 1984. The other was Father Reynaldo Rivera. However, he's not really connected to this at all, besides the time period. Father John Kerrigan had served as a priest in Plains, Montana, before being transferred to the Sacred Heart Catholic Church on Ronin on July 18th, 1984. On the evening of July 20th, 2 days after John Kerrigan's arrival and appointment in the church, he left a bakery in downtown Ronin, and this was the last time he was seen, ever. A missing persons report was filed on July 23rd, and on July 29th, articles of bloody clothing were found lying alongside Montana Highway 35 on the shores of Flathead Lake near Polson, along with a bloody coat hanger. These items were located roughly 5 miles away from Ronin, and on July 30th, Kerrigan's vehicle, also a brown Chevrolet Malibu, was discovered abandoned several miles away. In the trunk, his wallet with a whopping $1,200 and a blood-stained shovel and pillowcase was found. Though Kerrigan's remains have never been discovered, you'd have to be a fucking idiot to think that he wasn't murdered. The investigation in both New Mexico and Montana were linked due to similar characteristics with Father Reynaldo Rivera's murder. Similarities between the victims included their shared vehicles as well as the manners in which they were murdered, or believed to have been murdered. In both incidents, vehicles of the men were driven away from the crime scenes, and there was evidence that wire coat hangers had been used as a fucking murder weapon. And Rivera's autopsy showed that he had been strangled with some form of metal cord, like a wire coat hanger. While in Kerrigan's disappearance, a tangled and bloody coat hanger was found along with his clothing, so the killer here really likes coat hangers. Both men were also priests who belonged to the Franciscan order, and John Kerrigan was accused of, diddling the kittles, as all fathers in the Catholic Church seem to fucking do, so I don't think it'd be too much of a leap to say that Reynaldo might have done the same. These cases are very similar, but it is split on whether or not some detectives and police state officers believe that there's a connection. Police officers in New Mexico think that the two crimes are related by, both committed by a drifter with psychological problems with priests, diddled by one of them as a child. And despite the parallels in the crimes, other detectives in charge of the case think that there's no connection at all, despite the incredibly obvious connections in the cases. After this, though, the case kinda dies down, goes completely and utterly cold, and then a class action lawsuit was filed in 2011 for sexual abuse, and of the 80 clergy members who had been suspected or implicated in the sexual abuse of minors, Kerrigan was included on that list. Who would have ever fucking thought? From there's nothing. John Kerrigan remains missing to this day. If you diddled the kittles, I hope you get to, have your time in hell. If not, rest in peace, buddy. Helen Brach disappeared February 17, 1977, and was an American multimillionaire widow whose wealth had come, obviously, from marrying into the E.J. Brach & Sons Company fortune. She endowed the Helen V. Brach Foundation to promote animal welfare in 1974, and she disappeared after a routine checkup at the Mayo Clinic? Are you telling me this is an actual place and not just a website? This is Helen Brach. You're completely irrelevant right now. What? Mayo Clinic is a non-profit American academic focus on integrated healthcare, education, and research, practice specializing. What? What the fuck? I thought this was just a website. I didn't think it was an actual goddamn hospital. Back on topic, the circumstances of the disappearance were a little bit weird because one guy, a Mr. John Matlick, said that he had driven her down to the O'Hare International Airport for a flight to Florida, and he was, of course, the last person to see her alive, which makes him suspect numero uno, mi español muy gringo. Continuing on, Matlick was the focus of police attention during the investigation, but they could never nab his ass, so he walked free. However, after his death, his family and federal agents went on to say that it was him. They should just never prove it. Matlick died in a Pennsylvania nursing home at the age of 79, though, so he got away with it scot-free if he did do it. There's also the idea that she was killed in a horse racketeering case over the sentence of fraud and gambling, because what do humans love to do? Gamble on horses. Juanita Nielsen. Juanita Nielsen was an heiress to an incredibly large fortune in Australia, and she was incredibly notable for her activism against urban development around King's Cross, Sydney, and her support for the Builder Labourers Federation's green bans. Then she disappeared in King's Cross in 1975. The people responsible for her disappearance have never been identified, and her remains have never been found. But it's generally believed she was killed because of her activism. There have been strong suspicions of involved organized crime and police corruption. Corrupt cops? Who could have ever guessed? It's almost like almost all of them are corrupt assholes. In the early 1980s, 2 men associated with King Cross crime boss Abe Saffron were jailed for conspiracy to kidnap her based off of incidents leading up to her disappearance. Though the body was never found, a coronial inquest in 1983 determined that Nielsen had been killed, but failed to identify who or what killed her. The unsolved mystery has continued to be a concern for the Australian community and has inspired several films. Now, before we move on from this one, allow me to show you a source of rage. Woolloomooloo? That is not a goddamn city name. That belongs in a fucking kids show, not a goddamn Wikipedia article. I'll say it again. Why? I mean, if it's stuff by the indigenous people, and that's kind of disrespectful to the culture, and I do not mean racism, I simply mean mockery. Big difference. But Woolloomooloo, that does not belong in a Wikipedia article. How could you look at someone with a straight face and say, yeah, I live in Woolloomooloo? Sounds like a fucking poke. Narodum Naradipo. Narodum, also spelled Norakthip. I'm so sorry. We'll just stick with Narodum. Was and is a unique case. He's probably the last royal prince to ever go missing. He was the youngest of 5 children, and Naradipo's mother died of postnatal complications shortly after his birth. He was brought up by Princess Sisawaf. I'm not even gonna embarrass myself, man. He was educated in Beijing, China, with his 2 half-brothers under the personal supervision of Chinese Premier Zhao Enlai in 1960. He later returned home to Cambodia with his father, the king, in late 1975, and then disappeared mysteriously in 1976 during the Khmer Rouge. All 5 of the king's children disappeared, including the Prince Norodom Naradipo, Princess Norodom Surya Rogunsi, Prince Norodom, not even gonna say the rest of these. I am so sorry, but I'm white as fuck, man. I'm fucking mayonnaise white. Sihanouk wrote several letters to the Khmer Rouge leadership asking them to allow his children to come home and visit him, and he never received an answer. All of them were declared dead in absentia on June 7, 1994. Naradipo was granted the Cambodian royal title of Samdech Krom Kon posthumously. However, there were rumors he was still alive. Several people claimed to be him, all of whom were confirmed imposters. On February 12, 2010, Sihanouk, the king, reasserted that Naradipo and his other children were all killed by the Khmer Rouge and that they would never be seen again. Rest in peace. Woo! Yeah, baby, we did it! It's finally over! This has been a fucking behemoth. It took me 2 weeks. This half of the iceberg alone is probably gonna be about an hour, so thank you so much for watching this video. If you're still here, like, comment, and subscribe. You're either really bored or you enjoy my content, which means you should just subscribe anyways, if you haven't already, that is. Again, thank you so much for watching. It means a lot to me. I've been doing really well on YouTube lately, and I hope to keep that trend up and going. It makes me happy to create, and I'm glad to share the things that I can make with you. And I'm glad that you guys will watch these silly little videos. So, lads, lasses, and la-enbies, that's a conclusion to this one. Again, if you like the channel, like, comment, subscribe, all that other shill shit that every YouTube tells you. And also go check out my editor's channel. This wouldn't be possible without her. It's always in the description. I hope you have a wonderful time, and until next time, memento mori.